Deputy O'Callaghan.
Yesterday, the Financial Times reported that the British government intended to introduce legislation that would have the effect of not only undermining but breaking the withdrawal agreement that was entered into by the European Union and the United Kingdom government. It was stated that this was merely sabre-rattling or gamesmanship. However, today the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland informed members of Parliament in the House of Commons that the British government does intend to introduce legislation tomorrow that will, and these are the words he used, will break international law in a very limited and specific way. Now, I have to say, when I heard that, I was astonished. I thought it must be a typographical error by the newspaper that reported it, but I checked it, and alarmingly, they are the words that were used by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. We now know that this is not gamesmanship. We now know that this is not sabre-rattling, Minister. Instead, this is clearly efforts by a rudderless and reckless government to try to undermine the European Union in respect of agreements it has previously reached. What is the policy of the European Union and what is the policy of the Irish government in responding to this statement by the British government? And can I just conclude by stating, Minister, what we cannot do is we cannot become appeasers of a government that is blatantly engaging in breaches of international law.
Thank you, Concorda. And I welcome the opportunity to address members of the House on this important issue. As members will be aware, negotiations on the future partnership between the EU and the UK are ongoing. They're in their 8th round of talks in London this week. In accordance with the EU negotiating mandate, as Michel Barnier has repeatedly underlined, and as Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stressed yesterday in her statement on the matter, progress on the future partnership is inextricably linked to the full implementation of the withdrawal agreement, a legally binding international agreement between the EU and the UK, of which the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland is a central component. I am aware of the briefings and comments regarding the UK government's intentions with regard to proposed legislation implementing the provisions of the withdrawal agreement. If those comments represent the considered view of the British government, then I find them gravely concerning. While we still await publication of the legislation, earlier this week we raised the media reports and briefings on this issue with the UK through diplomatic and official channels to express our concerns, as you would expect. However, rather than being reassured, my concerns have been exacerbated by the additional comments deliberately made in the House of Commons today, openly committing the UK government to legislate to break international law in relation to the withdrawal agreement. I've asked our ambassador in London to raise this directly with the UK government this afternoon. Michel Barnier is also due to raise the issue with David Frost during their engagement today. Clearly, any unilateral departure from the terms of the withdrawal agreement would be a matter of considerable concern and a very serious step. Our view is that such a departure could seriously erode and damage political trust, not only in the Brexit negotiations, but also within Northern Ireland, at a time of real sensitivity. Northern Ireland does not need this further uncertainty in relation to Brexit. The UK does have a long and proud tradition of upholding international law and advocating for the primacy of the rule of law. Any departure from this tradition, particularly on an issue as high profile as Brexit, would have serious implications, not least for the UK's international reputation. We and the EU will continue to take a calm and measured approach. Time is short, and we are very much focused on trying to get a positive outcome in terms of the future relationship negotiations. Together, we will carefully analyse the detail of the legislation in question once it's published, and I remain in close contact daily with the EU task force on this critical issue. It is worth recollecting where we are at this juncture. The withdrawal agreement was agreed by the EU and the UK in October of last year. It was approved by the heads of all EU governments and received the assent of the European Parliament. It was signed and ratified by the UK Government, and legislation implementing it was passed by the UK Parliament at the beginning of this year. The withdrawal agreement is a legally binding international agreement between the EU and the UK, and it's not even 12 months old. From the beginning, Ireland's approach has been guided by the principle of securing a deal that worked for Northern Ireland and the island as a whole. The protocol includes provisions that avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, that recognise the common travel area, protect continued North-South cooperation, and protect the integrity of the single market and Ireland's place in it. It maintains commitments to ensure no diminution of rights, safeguards and equality of opportunity, as set out in the Good Friday Agreement. It maintains the single electricity market and reaffirms the EU and UK's commitment to the Peace Plus programme. Let me be very clear. The protocol agreed as part of the withdrawal agreement is designed and empowered to operate in all circumstances, including in the absence of an agreement on the future relationship between the EU and the UK. The protocol represents a fair and balanced outcome for all parties, with compromises on all sides. It is surely not too much to ask that the UK Government will implement it in full respect of its international obligations and have it in place in time for the end of this year when the transition period ends. I look forward to your comments.
Callaghan.
Minister, you're correct to be gravely concerned. It is astonishing that a minister of any government in any part of the world would attend before the parliament of that government and state that it is the intention of that government to break the law. What we need to learn, however, is that if we appease lawlessness, you only end up encouraging the lawbreaker. So it's absolutely imperative, Minister, that the European Union is absolutely straight when it comes to dealing with this issue. We should not tolerate any attempts by the British government to break the law. We have the provisions in Article 12 of the Protocol which set out what should happen for the purpose of implementation and what arises when there is a breach. However, everyone drafting that agreement and everyone who executed it presumed that there would be no breaches prior to the conclusion of the trade deal between the European Union and the United Kingdom. If it is the case that they go ahead and publish legislation that breaks international law, we should break off the talks, and you should tell the EU that we should do that, because, as I said before, appeasing lawlessness only encourages the lawbreaker.
First of all, can I just reassure deputies, there will be no appeasing of this approach. There will be no condoning of a strategy that proposes to breach international law, to undermine an agreement that the EU and the UK signed together less than a year ago. And so that is why I and the Taoiseach and others from various different political parties in this House, in government and in opposition, I think have been saying similar things in terms of the frustration and the surprise, quite frankly, at the approach that it seems the British government are proposing to adopt. But can I say also that from my experience in terms of Brexit negotiations, the way that Ireland is empowered to influence final outcomes that are in our own interests is to work as closely as we possibly can with the EU task force. We speak to the task force on a daily basis. I speak to Michel Barnier regularly, and on this issue, like so many other issues, we will input significantly, I hope, into how the EU responds to this issue. And when we see the legislation tomorrow, we will be able to make a more informed choice in terms of how the EU collectively, including Ireland, should respond to this course of action. I think the focus should not be taken away from the real prize here, which is to get a deal that avoids tariffs and quotas being implemented on trade between Ireland and Britain and the UK and the EU next year. And our focus has to be, regardless of this really unwelcome distraction in terms of a new approach from the British government, which is hugely problematic and illegal. Despite that, I think we need to focus on how we get an agreement between the EU and the UK that protects Ireland, north and south, that ensures that in January of next year we can continue to trade with our closest neighbour and friend in a way that minimises disruption and cost for businesses. And that will be my focus, that will be Michel Barnier's focus. And despite the fact that the UK's positioning today makes it more difficult to proceed on that basis, I still think we need to remain calm and resolute and focusing on the prize at hand in the coming weeks and months, which won't be achieved easily.